need to tell you about my latest obsession. Did you know Drake spent $100 million on a theme park? Well, sort of. So Drake is one of the ultimate multi-hyphenates: rapper, singer, actor, TV producer, poet, mogul, certified lover boy, certified pet, but you might not know about one of his lower key titles: amusement park owner. This is Luna Luna, an avant-garde art amusement park featuring rides and attractions designed by some of the most famous artists of all time, including Keith Haring, Jean-Michel Basquiat, and Salvador Dali. It originally opened in 1987 in Hamburg, Germany for only one summer, after which it went straight into storage and disappeared for decades. That was until December 2023, when Luna Luna finally returned in Los Angeles, brought back to life by an investment worth $100 million thanks to Drake. That is a lot of money, even for someone like Drake. And you might be thinking, why? Why would Drake invest that much into a bunch of old amusement park rides? I also found it weird that no one really seems to know about it, despite its uniqueness, despite the caliber of artists involved, and despite Drake, one of the most famous people on the planet, owning it. Although, no one's really spoken much about Drake the last year or so. Must have been a quiet spell for him. But Luna Luna is a fascinating project, and Drake's involvement is just one aspect of its bizarre story. And I've spent the last 2 years obsessively researching not just about this park, but learning about art, amusement parks, and Drake himself, in order to fully understand how this exists. And I need to share all of this with you. You can thank me later. It's getting pretty noisy in here. Come on, follow me. So, Luna Luna was an avant-garde art amusement park consisting of various attractions, each designed by contemporary artists of the time, ranging from rides such as carousels and a Ferris wheel to more abstract pavilions such as a robotic theatre and a mirrored dome. This whole project was masterminded by Austrian artist and extremely fascinating man Andre Heller. There's very few people who've done as much as this guy has, as beyond being an artist, he's also been a poet, radio host, peace activist, fireworks show creator, and potentially a scammer. But we'll come back to that. Out of all his various side quests, the most notable in my opinion, considering the whole Drake thing, was his time in the 1970s as a platinum-selling Austrian pop star. Drake should have done a joint album with him instead of Party Next Door. We can get to the whole is Drake a pop star thing later, but there's an interesting parallel between these two men at the heart of the Luna Luna story. In the 1980s, Andre Heller transitioned away from the world of music towards the world of visual art, creating pieces such as floral paintings made out of flowers and flying sculptures made out of hot air balloons. In 1987, the New York Times described his design philosophy as being that art should come in unconventional guises and be brought to those who might not ordinarily seek it out in more predictable settings. So it makes sense that this would lead him to create his most ambitious work, Luna Luna. Whilst the name was inspired by the term Luna Park, which was a name in the early 20th century for small local carnivals in Europe, as well as the name of one of the most famous amusement parks in Coney Island, the goal of the park was not to evoke nostalgia for the past, with Heller saying, Luna Luna tells a story void of nostalgic sentimentality. We're not talking about the supposed beauty of former times here, but about what is entirely unglorified in the here and now. Instead, the goal was to bring the world of avant-garde art into an experience easily accessible to the general public. Whilst Luna Luna was made up of individual contributions by over 30 artists, Heller saw the entire thing as something that could be considered a Gesamtkunstwerk, or total artwork, combining multiple forms of art into one whole, bringing together everything from paintings and sculpture to music and theatre. The idea of considering the theme park as a Gesamtkunstwerk is the kind of wanky idea that seems kind of pretentious and insufferable. So obviously I thought about it before and might talk about it more in the future, but I think for now the important thing to know is that Luna Luna was seen by Heller as one big art piece made up of lots of smaller art pieces. In order to create this, he needed to find other artists who shared his values and ideas and were open to the slightly out there idea of creating art for an amusement park, which would be viewed by some as a lesser place for your art to be seen than, say, a museum. The artists who ended up contributing to Luna Luna were from different disciplines from across both Europe and America, and most interestingly, artists from different generations. Heller managed to get artists who were incredibly established at the time, such as the king of surrealism Salvador Dali and Roy Lichtenstein, one of the founders of pop art. To complement these, Heller travelled to New York to convince some of the rising stars of pop art to contribute to Luna Luna. On his trip, he recruited Keith Haring, Jean-Michel Basquiat, and Kenny Scharf, the self-proclaimed Three Musketeers of the East Village's street artist scene. These three artists were friends, mutual admirers, and also rivals, but in a healthy way, not trying to knock each other down a peg, but pushing each other to create better work by constantly raising the bar. They ended up contributing pretty significantly towards Luna Luna, with 3 of the 4 actual mechanical rides at Luna Luna being their work: Haring designed Carousel, Basquiat a Ferris wheel, and Schaff a chair swing. It's interesting that Hella chose to give them such significant parts of this project, as whilst at the point Haring and Basquiat got involved in Luna Luna they were definitely famous, rubbing shoulders with everyone from Andy Warhol to Madonna, they weren't considered art superstars in the way they are today. Schaff, on the other hand, you might not have heard of even if you are familiar with Haring and Basquiat, and whilst he might not have the same dizzying reputation his two friends have now, at the time he was likely the 3rd most famous artist from this scene. All 3 started as street artists, using the walls and pavements and subways of New York City as their canvas, whilst as their fame and acclaim grew they went on to create art that was presented a bit more traditionally. They still had this tendency to create art in unconventional ways that could still be seen outside the museum. In particular, there was this desire to make sure what they created was accessible to the wider public, with Haring making their work available on reasonably priced t-shirts through his store, The Pop Shop. The philosophy they represented came down to, as Haring famously put it, art is for everybody. The public has a right to art. The public is being ignored by contemporary artists. It's a responsibility of a self-proclaimed artist to realise the public needs art, and not to make bourgeois art for the few and ignore the masses. Art is for everybody. But just because of this populist philosophy they had, it didn't mean they shied away from political or controversial messages through their work. They blurred the line between activism and art, and Basquiat and Haring in particular refused to shy away from their identities as a black man and a gay man respectively. Their work captured sometimes this interesting tension of being part of the cool it scene in late 80s New York, yet still sometimes being treated as outsiders due to how other people perceive these aspects of their identity. Basquiat's work explored topics such as police brutality, materialism and colonialism, whilst Haring tackled homophobia, the crack epidemic and the AIDS crisis. And as their influence spread globally, the opportunities to make more of an impact on the global art scene also grew, with Haring even travelling to Germany in 1986, the year before Luna Luna opened, to paint a mural on the Berlin Wall. And Luna Luna originally opening in West Germany isn't just a passing detail, but a massive part of his identity, opening in a divided Germany still reeling from the impact of its Nazi past. Art historian and curator Helen Molesworth, who was involved in the revival of Luna Luna, describes it as a quintessentially post-war project, shot through with 20th century traumas. Luna Luna represented many things that Nazism detested. Nazis saw modernist art as degenerate, and weren't too fond of the amusement park either, closing and later demolishing Berlin's Luna Park when they rose to power. Luna Luna took place in Moorweide Park in Hamburg, a spot previously used to gather Jews before they were deported to concentration camps. For Andre Heller, coming from a Jewish family, the decision to stage a project representing everything Nazis hated in such a location was an intentional and powerful statement. However, whilst this was an important part of his identity, I think describing Luna Luna as an art amusement park with an anti-Nazi agenda might mean you picture something quite different to what the actual experience of the park was, especially when the idea of making an art amusement park is pretty uncommon, and the most famous thing you might have as a reference point for such a concept is Dismaland. If you don't remember or didn't hear about it, Dismaland was a 2015 art exhibition curated by British street artist Banksy. Like Luna Luna, this featured works from a variety of artists, all within the setting of an amusement park. I think this was a really interesting project that I still regret I didn't make the trip to go visit myself. However, whilst both projects are similar on a surface level, a collective of artists reinterpreting the amusement park through the lens of their art, beyond this the two projects are almost diametrically opposed in what they're doing. As you would expect from a project named Dismaland, it was pretty bleak. Being led by Banksy, like his other work, Dismaland was satirical, provocative and, in my opinion, a little heavy-handed. Dismaland was inherently pretty critical of amusement parks and theme parks. In Banksy's own words, Dismaland was a theme park whose big theme is, theme parks should have bigger themes, which is obviously just refusing to engage with the medium and cynically. You know what? I'm not going to take the bait. Luna Luna, on the other hand, was much more interested in the potential of how the amusement park could be a vehicle for art, with many of the artists who participated already having a fascination with amusement parks and theme parks. Basquiat regularly visited Coney Island as a child, and in 1982 created a piece called Luna Park, named after an amusement park near Milan. Haring was a massive Disney fan whose childhood dream was to work for Disney, describing working on Luna Luna as
something that has been a fantasy of mine since the first time that I went to Disneyland or went to amusement parks in America when I was a kid.
Schaff also shared this love of Disney, and as a kid who grew up in the suburbs of LA, said that his art is influenced by growing up near Disneyland. This was most clearly obvious in his 1980 visual art piece called Carousel of Progress, named after the officially world-class Disney attraction of the same name.
The Carousel of Progress, a world-class ride.
For these artists, to make an amusement park attraction was more an opportunity to see what they could create with this form and how they could make art with it, rather than an opportunity to critique a perceived shallowness of existing amusement parks. And broadly, Luna Luna's experience wasn't really scathing, cynical, or even frankly that self-serious. Take for example Manfred Dykes' The Palace of the Winds, where audiences could watch a classical violinist perform alongside two flatulists. If you're not refined enough to be familiar with this art form, which was popular in the French cabaret scene of the late 19th century, flatulists are professional farters who, in sync with the violinist, farted on cue into a microphone. And audiences were blown away. The idea behind it was to intentionally juxtapose high art with low art, with Andre Heller saying that at Luna Luna, sometimes so-called good taste gets a well-deserved slap in the face. But this intentional lack of self-seriousness doesn't mean the project was shying away from bigger themes, as Banksy called it. Whilst Luna Luna was intentionally engineered to be an optimistic, inspirational and playful project, it still had pretty big goals. Helen Molesworth described Luna Luna's intentions as so. It asked the question, what needs to happen to make sure that fascism never takes hold again? As much as Luna Luna is a funhouse, it's a funhouse designed to try and keep you open, curious, empathetic and childlike, so you don't become a hard, crass person capable of hatred and anti-Semitism. One of Andre Heller's contributions to the project was a wedding chapel, where you could marry whoever or whatever you wanted. People married their friends, their pets, one guy even married his bike. But this was in 1987, at the height of the AIDS crisis, and to openly invite same-sex couples to marry during a time when it was illegal was a powerful political statement. The best combination of both this outlandish silliness and political commentary was Daniel Spurey's crap chancellery. As a child, Spurey had to flee Romania after his father was arrested and later killed by Nazis because of his Jewish heritage. Spurey's piece was designed to resemble the Nazi Party's headquarters, but mocking and belittling it by using this as the facade for Luna Luna's public bathrooms. Despite this piece's playful, irreverent tone, there's something really powerful about literally shitting on Nazis in the same location a few decades prior they'd been rounding up Jews to send away to concentration camps. I think in 1987 you could have visited Luna Luna and seen it as just an art exhibition, and whilst it's not an art exhibition, I think the more interesting way to view this is an amusement park where the attractions happen to be art pieces. Normally, I don't bother using the term amusement park and instead use theme park as a catch-all descriptor, as it's both the shorter and more colloquial term, and I personally find distinguishing between these two types of parks a kind of dull discussion of semantics. Also with Luna Luna, for the last year I've been casually referring to it as the Drake theme park, as that's just an inherently funny combination of words to say. However, reluctantly, I do think Luna Luna should be described as an amusement park to be accurate. Firstly, because that's the term Andre Heller uses, but more importantly, it's clear the aim here is not to theme the rides, but use the form of the ride to create an art piece. Whilst Haring and Schaff both mentioned the influence of Disneyland on that art, these pieces are drawing less on that Disney immersive themed approach and more riffing on the tradition of fairground art. Fun fairs and fairgrounds have this specific style of art that is very recognisable, often very garish, inharmonious, and just plain bizarre, which is how some people describe my fashion sense, but I have a bit of an admiration for funfair art. My favourite kind are these absolutely absurd tableaus of an assortment of different pop culture figures, superheroes, Disney characters, pop stars, all recontextualised and mashed together into one piece. I mean, who knew Rihanna was such good mates with Sonic the Hedgehog? It's an identifiable enough style that it's even become a meme. Filmmaker Charles Newland grew up in a nomadic Romany traveller family, and in an article for the file sharing site WeTransfer, Newland said that fairground art is art mixed with commerce. That's always been the purpose, to bring in money. It's why they still spend good money getting the rides painted like it today. Like the ones with gigantic Hollywood superheroes on them. Nothing brings in a crowd of young people like a 40-foot picture of Spider-Man or something like that. The art always worked. And it still does. It's this utilitarian goal that makes it basically folk art. It's not trying to be some kind of personal expression, but still ends up reflecting a lot about the culture of the time in which it was created. But it's going to need someone smarter than me to tell you exactly what. What's interesting is, stylistically, it's not too far removed from the way many of the pop artists who worked on Luna Luna operate in terms of how they recontextualize pop culture figures in their work, like Kenny Scharf using Hanna-Barbera cartoon characters in much of his work, or Basquiat referencing Batman characters, or Roy Lichtenstein's famous Look Mickey transposing a scene from an illustrated Mickey Mouse book. Another aspect that makes Luna Luna feel more adjacent to a funfair than a Disneyland-style theme park is the element of its, at least intended, portability or movability or whatever the word is. Basically, after its summer in Hamburg, Luna Luna was meant to travel the world, first touring across Europe and then later crossing the Atlantic to the USA. Going back to the intent of the project, what's the point in making something to encourage people to be open-minded and empathetic if they can't see it in the first place? This was inherently designed as a project to be as widely seen as possible, removing the barriers to entry art exhibitions often have. By being able to travel the world, it'd be easier for your average person to visit. Even its price made it more accessible to the masses. Whilst Luna Luna did charge entry, it only cost 20 Deutsche Marks to enter, roughly the equivalent of $11 today. But there was also this larger goal that, by presenting art via an amusement park, it would be more accessible to the masses. A lot of art is technically quite easy to access, often presented in free museums, or at least having free nights you can go to in central locations in major cities. The issue with art's accessibility is frequently more how it's presented, often intellectualized as something where you need to know the theory and the meaning and the context that makes people feel like they don't get it, rather than just being able to appreciate something's aesthetics at face value. Andre Heller actively disliked this exclusionary approach to art, saying, "Amongst the most exciting are the times I've produced something that proves to be an inspiration and a pleasure for people of all ages and levels of education. In my opinion, art is not a secret society for a select few. It asks questions and does not shy away from uncomfortable answers." Art curator Lumi Tan described Luna Luna as having a truly successful ability to make the avant-garde accessible by being something you could physically and tangibly engage with. By being able to ride or interact with these different pieces of art rather than just looking at them, it made it more straightforward to appreciate regardless of your level of expertise or knowledge. Even though it was only open for one summer, the impact can still be seen on some of those who visited. One particularly notable example is German artist Carsten Holler, who before visiting Luna Luna was studying a science PhD, but his visit to Luna Luna, in his own words, changed his life and was a major factor in inspiring him to quit the world of science and become an artist himself. Which is really what we needed, one less doctor in the world. The participatory nature of the work Carsten Holler would go on to create, ranging from carousels to slides to nightclubs, was massively influenced by how his formative experience at Luna Luna in the 80s shaped his idea of what art could be in the first place. But sadly, despite the intention of the Luna Luna to travel the world to reach and influence even more people, these plans fell through, and Andre Heller ended up having to take out a loan in order to put the rides into storage, putting him into debt. In 1990, with no other options available, Heller decided to sell the entire project for $6 million to a charitable foundation based in San Diego, who planned to give Luna Luna a permanent home in the States. However, at some point the foundation got cold feet and tried to back out of the deal, leading to an incredibly complicated 15-year legal battle between the foundation and Heller across both Europe and America. During this time, Luna Luna remained hidden away from view in 44 shipping containers, which ended up sat and forgotten in the depths of rural Texas. In 2018, over 30 years after Luna Luna had last been seen by the public, Colby Mugrabi posted an article on her art and fashion blog Mini Muse about Luna Luna, ending by saying, "Here is to hoping the project is one day revived so the world can once again bask in the collective creativity of Heller and his collaborators." This clearly inspired something when this article was stumbled upon by Michael Goldberg, a creative director at a marketing agency who was baffled that he and barely anyone he spoke to had even heard about Luna Luna. A feeling I can definitely relate to. Goldberg decided to reach out to Heller directly to research ways this could possibly be revived, but due to these pieces now no longer being owned by Heller and having sat forgotten for decades, to bring Luna Luna back to life would require money. A lot of it. Which is where Drake comes in. So, Drake is one of the best-selling musicians of the 21st century. Billboard named him the Artist of the Decade for the 2010s, and on their chart he has racked up 13 US #1 singles, the same number as Michael Jackson, and an astonishing 217 top 40 singles. But you might not know about his other various business ventures. He's an executive producer of the hit streaming shows Euphoria and Top Boy, an investor in the soccer team AC Milan, and a co-owner of the esports organisation 100 Thieves. Whilst these do all seem to line up with interests of Drake's, they also appear to be clearly profitable ventures. And you can maybe think there's a similar financial motivation behind Luna Luna, but the amount invested is a lot. Anthony Gonzalez from Drake's company Dream Crew, and now CEO of Luna Luna, was quoted in an article in the New York Times about the scale of this investment. The stakes are clear. Outside of music and touring, Gonzalez said, "This is probably our biggest project to date. With Dream Crew as majority owner, overall investment in Luna Luna is approaching $100 million US. This is a lot of money. So the big question is, why? What's in it for Drake? Is it financial gain or something a bit different? Despite Drake's company owning Luna Luna, the only direct public comment Drake himself has made about the project was the following statement as part of the acquisition. "When I first heard about Luna Luna, I was blown away. It's such a unique and special way to experience art. This is a big idea and opportunity that centers around what we love most, bringing people together." Okay, but like a baseball team brings people together. Common enemies bring people together. Super Bowl performances bring people together. It doesn't really give us any insight into why Drake decided to buy Luna Luna. To have any chance of understanding why Drake made this decision, I think it's important to also try to understand Drake. Drake as a pop culture figure has always really fascinated me, perhaps more so than he ever has as a musician, despite him having made many songs I enjoy. When you think of Drake, whilst he's definitely a rapper, in many respects he's closer to a pop star than many of his rap peers. And I'm not even using this in a derogatory sense of the term. I love pop music, and if it wasn't for the existence of Carly Rae Jepsen, he'd be a strong contender for my favourite Canadian pop star. Also, I think it's notable that this isn't something that Drake himself has necessarily shied away from. On his 2020 collaboration with DJ Khaled, aptly titled Pop Star, he raps, "I'm a pop star, but this shit ain't bubblegum, yeah." Which in many ways is the perfect encapsulation of what Drake represents. He's never really made sugary dance pop music like his former Young Money label mate Nicki Minaj was doing when she was breaking out. In fact, this kind of music is something he actively distanced himself from early on in his career. For me, the David Guetta stuff just doesn't work. I don't really want to go there. There's other artists, that's their sound. They feel in order to thrive internationally that they gotta do straightforward, fall to the floor, David Guetta, Pitbull music. So what do I mean when I say I think of Drake as a pop star? I'm not just talking about his use of melodic singing, but more in terms of his role within pop culture. I think Drake inherently, whilst clearly having his roots in a hip-hop sound, has a populist sensibility which drives his artistic decisions. You see this through his fairly accessible and easy to listen to discography, the themes he chooses to tackle, or more notably not tackle, in his work, and his larger-than-life persona that inhabits both his music and his performances. His keen business sensibilities, understanding of what's marketable, and ear for hits feels in many respects more reminiscent of a Taylor Swift or a Rihanna or a Bruno Mars than that of a Kendrick Lamar. Now, I don't know if you became as obsessed with the infamous Drake versus Kendrick feud as I did, but I could not look away from watching it unfold. Or stop playing Not Like Us. I feel like there was a point where every video on my TikTok feed was some variant on the BBL Drizzy sound, with loads of random people using it to hop in on the beef and join in the anti-Drake lashings. If you somehow avoided this whole thing, I'm not going to rehash this whole very complicated, very messy beef, especially as I'm acutely aware that despite the Jack Harlow hair, I'm no expert in the intricacies and nuances of hip-hop culture. But as someone who's particularly interested in understanding Drake better because of my obsession with Luna Luna, I did find it a fascinating glimpse into Drake's psyche. The key line from Kendrick's verse on Like That sparked the whole feud was responding to the idea that himself, Drake, and J. Cole were the big three of modern rap, saying, "Motherfuck the big three, it's just big me." This is really not that much of a diss, particularly compared to everything that ended up getting thrown out later, but I do think it's interesting that Drake even felt like this needed a track in response in the first place. Unlike Drake, Kendrick, despite having some major hits and widespread appeal, is very clearly not making pop music. His music is indisputably hip-hop and has a level of credibility which Drake's lacks. One day, Kendrick's obituary will talk about To Pimp a Butterfly being one of the greatest albums of all time. Drake's will probably talk about him making some fun bangers like One Dance and God's Plan. This is something that Kendrick seems keenly aware of, as at another point in Like That, he says that Prince outlived Mike Jack. Drake had previously compared his success and number of hits to that of Michael Jackson, whilst Kendrick in contrast clearly sees himself as more of a Prince figure, with his more artistic acclaimed body of work being one that will outlive Drake's. Drake has always seemed to have a level of insecurity over the way he's been perceived, with this being particularly exacerbated by Kendrick as his peer gaining the kind of acclaim and celebration from hip-hop purists Drake so clearly desired. Despite Drizzy's dizzying levels of commercial success, he still lacks the level of reverence that he clearly feels he deserves.
Sometimes I don't feel celebrated when I know maybe somebody else would be celebrated for those accomplishments, you know? Yeah, of course, there's a part of me that wishes that I was celebrated a little more, but I mean, who wants to listen to me cry about being celebrated more?
But despite it being, especially in hindsight, clearly a terrible career move for Drake to respond to Kendrick's Like That verse and ignited beef against the guy who's literally won a Pulitzer, it does feel like a big element driving it wasn't just Drake's ego, but also this insecurity in how he's perceived by his peers and how much he fits into this wider landscape of hip-hop, which ironically was one of the key elements Kendrick was then able to weaponize against him.
No, you're not a colleague, you're a fucking colonizer.
So, how does this all link to the art world? Well, I think it's notable that both Kanye West and Jay-Z, two rappers who are part of the generation before Drake, have taken significant steps into the world of art. Whilst these moves seem to be driven by a genuine love of art, it does also play into their public image and how they're perceived. Kanye West has a documented fondness for James Turrell, an artist famous for his work with light. In 2019, he donated $10 million to help Turrell finish Road and Crater, an installation he'd been working on for over 40 years inside an extinct volcano. This association not only benefited the image West had carved out over the previous decade of being a capital A artist, but he was even able to film his incredibly boring 2019 IMAX film Jesus is King at Road and Crater, which, yes, I paid to go see in IMAX, and I don't want to talk about that decision. Jay-Z has frequently used associations with art in his image and work, most notably rapping alongside his wife Beyonce in front of the Mona Lisa in a music video shot in the Louvre, which is an incredible flex. But more interesting to me is the relationship Jay-Z has with the work of Jean-Michel Basquiat, one of the artists featured in Luna Luna. Like Basquiat, Jay-Z is from New York, and someone he's referenced in his music a few times.
Inspired by Basquiat, my chariots fire. I got Basquiat's in the lobby of my spot. Versace place, got the Basquiat collab from Versace's place. Banksy bitches, Basquiat. It ain't hard to tell. I'm the new Jean-Michel. Basquiat's, Warhols, serving as my muses. Yellow Basquiat in my kitchen corner. Go ahead, lean on that shit, Blue, you own it,
Jay-Z now owns two genuine Basquiat paintings, and even in 2021 appeared alongside Beyonce in an ad for Tiffany's, featuring a never-before-seen Basquiat. But what makes this all more than just a flex is the genuine connection Jay-Z has to his work. Like Jay-Z, Basquiat was from New York, involved in the hip-hop scene, and a trailblazing black creative, and Jay-Z talks with clarity and fondness in his memoir about how he interprets Basquiat's work, and the parallels to his own life as a fellow artist from New York. Jay-Z wasn't the only rapper to drop art and even specifically Basquiat references in his music, but as the most prominent and frequent offender of this rap cliche, he drew a level of ire, with his 2014 interview with one of his rap peers criticising what he called trendy art shoutouts in rap. It's like Hove can't drop bars these days without at least 4 art references. I would love to collect at some point, but I think the whole rap art world thing is getting kind of corny. Also, you know who said that? It was Drake. Notably, Jay-Z responded to Drake's criticism in a verse in the 2014 track, We Made It.
Sorry, Mr. Drizzy, for so much y'all talk. Silly me rapping about shit that I really bought.
Potentially, Drake took this as a challenge, as by 2017, he had gotten into art collecting, which he shared in a video showing a tour of his Toronto condo. CBC asked a local art consultant called Devin Patel to give his thoughts in an article called, If This Is Drake's Art Collection, What Does It Say About Him? Patel didn't seem massively impressed, saying, the collection does show an obvious appreciation and basic knowledge of art, which is great, but I think Drake could definitely benefit from visiting some galleries or working with an art consultant. The beauty of collecting is really connecting and living with artwork and expressing something unique about yourself through your acquisitions of different pieces. I do really like this idea of an art collection expressing something unique about yourself. You can see it in Jay-Z's love of Basquiat and how he relates to his work beyond it just being very expensive and exclusive art to own. So, if we're to analyse Drake through his art collection, then I don't think any piece he owns is more revealing than one by Patrick Martinez called Less is More. Martinez wanted to reflect his frustration at the trend towards creating filler content over meaningful work, and inspired by debates he'd overheard at parties about who the greatest rapper of all time was, created this piece. Now, this was the meaning Martinez intended when creating it. However, obviously when you are Drake, and especially when you decide to buy this piece and hang it in your home, I think it expresses something a little bit different. It could be an ironic thing that shows off his sense of humour, but also the way he describes seeing this piece for the first time, it doesn't feel massively like he sees the funny side. I'm staring at the wall, man, and at first it was just anger. I felt like ripping that shit down. Then I stood there for a second, and I was like, that's my name up there. I'm representative of this generation, and this guy loved Pac enough to make this piece, and that's fucking amazing, man. Because you know what? I hope someday someone will make that piece for me, and it'll be like, less whatever, more Drake. This does not feel like a guy who's particularly secure in himself. Him putting it up on his wall sounds like he still felt like he had something to prove for him to be able to truly stand among the greats of the genre, like Tupac, like Jay-Z, like Kendrick Lamar. Whilst Drake didn't start name-dropping art in his songs the way he considered corny when Jay-Z did it, he did go on to make more explicit connections to the art world in his work. The video for his 2020 song Tootsie Slide, filmed at his home, prominently featured his now even more expansive art collection. The divisive cover for his 2021 album, Certified Lover Boy, was designed by British artist Damien Hirst, but the most infamous link was his iconic 2015 video for Hotline Bling, drawing inspiration from James Turrell, the artist I mentioned earlier whose work Kanye West donated $10 million to. As I said before, Turrell is an artist famous for his work with light, using light as his ink to colour his minimalist environments in different vibrant ways. However, the Hotline Bling video drew controversy with how heavily it borrowed from Turrell's work, not just drawing inspiration from his overall aesthetic, but also lifting from specific installations. This illuminated staircase, for example, is undeniably similar to Turrell's Amrita piece. Director X, who directed the video, denies any conscious inspiration from Turrell, but this plausible deniability is harder to argue when taking into account a Rolling Stone profile on Drake from the previous year, in which he enthusiastically visits a Turrell exhibit in LA and says quite directly, "I fuck with Turrell." In this article, there's this great part where Drake's getting a guided tour of the Turrell exhibit, but instead of listening to the tour guide, Drake is instead getting his assistant to snap pictures of him with the art. In one shot, Drake throws up his arms in a crucifix pose. He gazes off morosely in another. This need for Drake to centre himself in the art is quite funny, but in his defence, the participatory nature is also part of the appeal of Turrell's art, working in a similar way to Luna Luna in how it encourages you not just to passively observe the art, but also to engage with it, walking into and becoming part of these environments that Turrell creates. It's a similar element that made the Hotline Bling video so special. The vibrant lighting is clearly inspired by Turrell's work, but what made it so iconic was the image of Drake dancing in the Turrell-esque room. The combination of these hypnotic, ethereal backdrops with the goofy dancing was what made it so distinctive. James Turrell did at the time seem slightly annoyed about the video, but also took it as a compliment. While I am truly flattered to learn that Drake fucks with me, I nevertheless wish to make it clear that neither I nor any of my woes was involved in any way in the making of the Hotline Bling video. In 2024, Drake posted pictures of himself and Turrell hanging out in Rodin Crater, so whatever potential awkwardness between the two has clearly been long since squashed. These examples I mentioned so far mainly involve Drake taking inspiration from the art world and integrating it into his world, the world of music. But what about Drake entering the art world before Luna Luna? His most active step previously was in 2015, when he curated an exhibition called Like It Like This. This was a collaboration with Beats Headphones, which featured works by Black American artists, including Luna Luna artist Jean-Michel Basquiat. Next to each work was a set of Beats Headphones, where you could listen to a song by a different black musician, selected by Drake to pair up with each piece, including songs by Jay-Z, Kanye West, The Weeknd and Kendrick Lamar.
He a fan, he a fan, he a fan.
By pairing these art pieces with contemporary songs by black musicians, there's a clear challenge here for rap and R&B music to be treated with the same respect and reverence that visual art is. But also in the other direction, Drake wanted to use this music to make the art more accessible to those who wouldn't normally engage with the art world by breaking the conventions of how it's often presented.
I like the fact that when you walk in the room, it's like kind of a different vibe too. It's like no one's prompting you to like be quiet or, you know, sometimes that's how people on the outside view the art world. Like it's very conservative and stuffy, and it's not today. I mean, I felt excitement when I walked in the room.
With this being Drake's most significant foray into the world of art before Luna Luna, there's a couple of interesting parallels to Luna Luna as a project. Firstly, both represent a desire to find new ways to reach people who wouldn't typically engage with art, but also they both connect to the world of hip-hop. I mentioned earlier how Jay-Z saw a connection between his music and Basquiat's art, but both Basquiat's work as well as that of his contemporary Keith Haring was very much in conversation with hip-hop culture. Both started as street artists in New York in the 80s at the same time that this hip-hop scene was flourishing. I think now when we hear the term hip-hop, we think primarily, if not exclusively, about music, but in the 1980s, hip-hop was seen as a multidisciplinary artistic and cultural movement made up of 4 key elements: rapping, DJing, breakdancing, and graffiti art. Basquiat was very much part of this hip-hop culture, primarily through his start in graffiti art, but he also dabbled in music production. His later work would take inspiration from this sample-based approach of hip-hop music. Similar to the way hip-hop musicians would take samples from other music and recontextualize and repurpose them, he sometimes used a collage style in his work, which pulled together pre-existing material to make something brand new. Whilst Haring was not part of the hip-hop scene in the same way Basquiat was, he was incredibly influenced by the hip-hop culture of 80s New York. This wasn't just limited to being inspired by the graffiti of his street art peers, but he also created pieces in response to Public Enemy songs, and the vibrant movement of the figures in his work was massively inspired by hip-hop dance. Unless Drake comes out and says it explicitly, we'll never know for sure what was driving Drake's motivation to buy Luna Luna. But for someone who seems pretty invested and insecure in how he's perceived, I don't think buying Luna Luna for such a large amount of money seems like an incredibly smart investment from a business perspective, but does seem like a savvy move from an image perspective. There's a credibility to Luna Luna that goes beyond just its associations with art or with amusement parks, but links back to Drake's world. Luna Luna, in a similar way to the Like It Like This exhibition, gave Drake an opportunity to bridge the world of art to the world of hip-hop. Luna Luna features incredibly unique works by not just 2 of the most popular artists of the 20th century, but 2 artists who were key figures in showing hip-hop aesthetics in their art. By owning and resurrecting such a unique project, it not only gives Drake's image a prestige boost within the art world, but arguably could within hip-hop too, even if it was to cost him millions to do so. So in 2022, when Drake entered negotiations to buy Luna Luna, Andre Heller, who had previously not heard of him, began to research into Drake by, in his own words, listening to his music, watching his attitudes. I really hope he listened to Marvin's Room because, what a song. I think there's a good chance he did, because he later had extremely high praise for Drake in the intro to the official Luna Luna book, saying, "It is thanks to one of the most undoubtedly extraordinary people of our time that this treasure has finally been unearthed. Drake, I bow down to him and the ever serene and noble protagonists of his dream crew." Describing Drake as one of the most undoubtedly extraordinary people of our time is made even funnier by this being in the same piece where Heller casually name drops a bunch of his good mates, Pablo Picasso, Billie Holiday, and Chekhov? As in the guy with the gun? To be fair, could Chekhov have written Marvin's Room? Let's be real. I really wish this Luna Luna revival could have been the opportunity for these 2 icons, Andre Heller and Drake, to team up, but sadly this was not to be the case. You know, earlier I mentioned that Heller might have had a scammer era? Well, as the deal with Drake and co for Luna Luna was being finalised, Heller became embroiled in a forgery scandal. Heller sold a frame he said was created by Basquiat for €800,000, which he later claimed was simply a childish prank, which has the same energy as when someone who says something really mean or offensive then says, "Oh, it was just a joke, stop being so sensitive." To his credit, Heller bought back the frame for the value he sold it at, and an investigation by Austrian prosecutors was dropped. But the damage was done. Due to the optics of this scandal, it was decided it was best for Heller to sadly no longer be directly involved in this revival of his magnum opus. But even without Heller, Drake and Dream Crew were determined to bring Luna Luna back to its former glory, bringing on board a team of art experts and the major events company Live Nation for a planned world tour, with what the New York Times described as Drake-sized ambitions. The newly appointed CEO of Luna Luna, Anthony Gonzalez, said, "Drake's done everything at the highest level, and scale is something that he does better than anybody. This is a massive undertaking with huge logistical aspects, tons of moving parts, but it doesn't seem overwhelming in my mind in any way whatsoever. It's just like, let's go and execute it." After 36 years in storage, with this new team and massive ambition behind it, it looked like Heller's dreams of Luna Luna touring the globe were about to be fulfilled. In late 2023, Luna Luna opened to the public in Los Angeles, and in March 2024, I flew over 5,000 miles to see it for myself. Luna Luna was finally back, but this time with one big difference. Despite it originally opening in Hamburg, LA as a city felt to me like such a natural home for Luna Luna, a city filled with art and artifice and amusements. On the same trip, I visited Disneyland, art galleries, movie studios, museums, and immersive experiences. But with the exception of finally visiting my most anticipated theme park attraction of all time, Cars Land. Look around. Can you see that? This is Cars Land. This is the best day of my life. Nothing was more exciting to me on this trip than getting to experience Luna Luna in all its glory, like those in Hamburg got to back in 1987. Well, with one key difference. This time you can't actually ride the attractions. This is allegedly due to concerns over safety, with the team saying that these rides most assuredly wouldn't pass a 2023 inspection. Earlier I made the point that whilst you could view Luna Luna as an art exhibition, I felt it was more interesting to consider it as an amusement park whose attractions happen to also be art pieces. However, I think it'd be very hard to argue that this revival is still really an amusement park. This is an exhibition, presenting and preserving art that was created for this 1987 amusement park. Art historian Helen Molesworth, who was brought on as a curatorial advisor for the revival, now titled Luna Luna Forgotten Fantasy, said, "Sometimes I wonder if we're watching the transformation of what once was an amusement park into a sculpture park." Whilst this is definitely a bummer, the upside is the way this is presented provides a lot of context and understanding of why this project came to be, who these artists are, and how it managed to come back. There's various panels around each artist's piece, a section showing the timeline of cultural and historical moments leading up to Luna Luna's original opening, and a whole section with shipping containers, showing how it was brought back to life. In fact, how long Luna Luna was in storage is now a key part of the story of this exhibition, really framing it as this project that disappeared. Outside as you enter, it says that it's been lost since 1987, and inside talks about how Luna Luna sat forgotten in 44 shipping containers. How long it's been gone has now become part of its appeal and mythology. Luna Luna Forgotten Fantasy is in the middle of the arts district in downtown LA, and as I walked over to the venue and saw all this graffiti art around me, including this massive mural of Drake's former collaborator and one-time muse Rihanna, it felt like such a perfect place for a project like Luna Luna to come back. I entered by walking under an inflatable art piece created by Andre Heller called Dream Station, which was kind of reminiscent of his hot air balloon art he did before Luna Luna. This originally hosted a cafe in 1987, but now the cafe is just to the side of this, where I sat and had a coffee with a very cute Luna Luna branded sleeve as I waited for my entry time. There's also lockers available here inside of a shipping container, alluding to the myth of where Luna Luna had been hidden since 1987, and seeing this shipping container made me feel right at home, like I was back at my beloved Thorpe Park in England. After my coffee, I had a short queue to get in before taking a long dramatic walk down a hallway to enter the exhibition, where I finally got to see these attractions, or I guess art pieces, that I'd been obsessing over for so long. Wow. I'm not gonna lie, when I first walked in, I felt a bit emotional. I had waited so long, researched so much, and travelled so far to reach this moment. And the upside to this exhibition being entirely inside is how gorgeously all of these attractions were lit up. They were static for the most part, but every now and then they would all spring to life in unison, with a dramatic lighting package and a custom soundtrack made especially for this revival. And it was mesmerising to watch. So there are 4 actual mechanical rides on display here, with 3 of these being designed by the 3 musketeers of the New York pop art scene, Keith Haring, Kenny Scharf and Jean-Michel Basquiat. In many respects, the heart of Luna Luna is in these rides, the purest fusion of both the art and the amusement park sides of this project. Kenny Scharf's contribution was a chair swing that he painted in his distinctive style. As an artist, in many ways he was probably the most natural fit for Luna Luna. A self-described pop surrealist, Scharf as an artist was inspired as much by the surrealist work of Salvador Dali as Hanna-Barbera cartoons like the Flintstones and the Jetsons. When he was advised to paint what he loved, he started to incorporate characters from these shows into his art, but paired this childlike imagery with darker themes like nuclear war, just like It's a Small World. Let's not get into that again. Outside of his paintings, many of his pieces were about taking everyday objects like vacuum cleaners, bikes and cars and making them surreal and outrageous. His philosophy was very much that any surface could be a canvas. An amusement park ride is such a natural extension of this idea that, based on his trajectory, even without Luna Luna, he might have ended up making art out of a theme park ride anyway. This chair swing was originally from the 1930s, and Scharf travelled to Vienna to paint over the whole thing himself. From a distance, it has a more conventional look than some of the other stuff on display here, keeping the structure and overall look of the original ride. But as you get closer, the weirdness becomes apparent in the details, in particular these strange, intimidating, grimacing faces. Back in 1987, the chair swing also had these cartoonish creature sculptures sat on the top. Sadly, despite these being the most distinctive element of Scharf's original work, these have been removed and were instead displayed to the side, I presume for safety reasons. I mentioned earlier that I feel a lot of Luna Luna is drawing from funfair art, and this feels like one of the most direct examples, with the colours and design choices feeling like it's taking the gaudy approach from this kind of art and pushing it further. Scharf even said that these sculptures on the top were specifically designed to catch people's eyes from afar and draw them in, basically the same design philosophy as a lot of fairground art. I wonder if at any point Scharf considered including Hanna-Barbera cartoon characters into this piece, as it would have been really interesting to see him riff off that recontextualization of pop culture you often see in funfair art. Overall though, this piece doesn't feel too far removed visually from rides in other amusement parks, just with Scharf's signature trippy twist added to the colours and the imagery. Jean-Michel Basquiat's Ferris wheel on the other hand feels very explicitly and obviously an art piece, drawing attention to its status as an art object with the images and text across the wheel challenging and provoking in the same way much of Basquiat's work does. For example, at the bottom of the wheel are the words Jim Crow, drawing attention to the fact just a couple decades prior, amusement parks would have been racially segregated in the same way as any other part of American public life. I could have easily spent an hour poring over every detail across this piece, and it was really cool how when it moved, each of the characters revealed in turn more words and imagery, and I liked how the kinetics of the ride drew attention to each new word appearing, contrasting this childlike enchantment with harsh words such as bleeding fingers, pornography and rake, which is one letter away from Drake. Perhaps this was fate? Speaking of influential musicians, Basquiat's Ferris wheel was accompanied by a piece of music by Miles Davis, an influential jazz musician who was one of Basquiat's musical heroes and a major influence on his work. Basquiat insisted that he would only work on the project if his Ferris wheel was accompanied by Miles Davis's song Tutu, and it's an interesting way Basquiat used the medium of the amusement park to add a musical component to his art. Basquiat's piece felt very rich in terms of meaning and possible interpretations, which I'm sure smarter, more art-savvy people would be able to fully unpack. But that doesn't mean it wasn't still playful, with the largest image right at the centre of the Ferris wheel being that of a baboon's arse, and I loved how this towering image of a baboon mooned Luna Luna. Finally, there's also 2 carousels. Austrian artist Eric Brauer designed one, with each of the seats being a different surreal fantasy creature, whilst Keith Haring's featured a colourful parade of dancing humanoids, crawling babies and dog-like creatures. What sets Haring's contribution apart from Scharf and Basquiat's is it doesn't feel like an amusement park ride has just been used as a canvas for his art, but the carousel itself has been customised and moulded in Haring's style. The seats are 3D versions of Haring's figures, and Haring travelled over to Austria to work closely with German ride designer Peter Penz in order to translate his sketches into these seats. There's a fun novelty seeing his work enter a 3-dimensional space, but still retaining that 2D charm. As a theme park nerd, it kinda reminds me of how cleverly and faithfully Universal adapted Dr. Seuss's 2D illustrations into a physical 3D space in their Seuss-themed area. Haring also made some tarps to surround his carousel, which provide a good point of reference for how the carousel translates his style. Here, on top of the yellow background, figures in various different bright colours are all moving and dancing, surrounded by squiggly lines which give this image an implied sense of movement. On the carousel, the yellow central cylinder functions as the background, with the seats on the outside in the same bright colours as these figures. As the carousel rotates and these figures move around, that implied movement from Haring's static work becomes real, with the kinetics becoming more than just squiggly lines, making this feel like a Haring piece brought to life. This central yellow cylinder is also decorated with various cartoonish figures, animals and creatures, including a self-portrait of Haring wearing one of his own shirts. Haring did create a few self-portraits over the years, but this is a rare case of him creating something that is recognisably himself, but also within his distinctive style. It could be illustrative of how personal and important this piece was to him that he felt that he wanted to represent himself here on this carousel. It's enchanting to watch these figures move around, but it does feel a shame to not be able to fully experience this when we're unable to sit on these figures and become part of the artwork. In fact, with all these rides, as cool as they are to watch in action, it can't help but feel like a compromised experience when we can't actually ride them ourselves. The visceral element we lose with these rides is also slightly lost in some of the other art pieces, like Daniel Spurry's Crap Chancellery. I mentioned earlier that Spurry designed this mock Nazi headquarters facade to lead to the bathrooms of Luna Luna. I did enjoy seeing the initials WC and the German for ladies and gentlemen adorned on top of this, as well as these fascist looking pillars topped with plastic poo. What does baffle me, however, is that they didn't put this facade in front of the public bathrooms here. Based on the layout of the space, I felt like this was definitely possible, and it's sad they chose not to, as it removes this visceral element of getting to go for an anti-fascist shit. Instead, when I did go for a shit, it felt totally neutral about fascism. Very disappointing. Roy Lichtenstein's contribution to Luna Luna was for a glass maze, wrapped in an abstract piece which draws from his Perfect Imperfect series. Unlike most of Lichtenstein's work, which featured imagery originating from mass media, these were a wholly original series of abstract pieces. In his perfect paintings, the rule was that he would draw a continuous line from one edge of the canvas to the other and back again. In contrast, in his imperfect paintings, these lines were allowed to jut out and break away from the edges of the canvas. Here, these perfect and imperfect pieces are on each side of the box containing the maze, and on the imperfect side, the line goes out beyond the edge of the box, a fun way to translate this idea into a 3D space. Before I arrived, I was led to believe that I wasn't going to be able to enter the maze, and was very surprised when they let me go inside. This maze is made of a series of glass panels, which, combined with the purple lighting, creates a cool disorientating effect, and even at some points was reflecting a distorted image of Basquiat's Ferris wheel, which was sat opposite the maze. This was the only point on my visit to Luna Luna where I got to actually touch the art, and seeing the fingerprints on the glass of the people who passed through before me felt kind of thrilling after a few hours of just looking at these attractions. Even though I did almost immediately bang straight into one of the glass panels and was worried I was going to somehow break the whole thing. I realised afterwards that it was only the exterior that was designed by Lichtenstein, whilst the interior was designed by Heller and his team. It didn't diminish my feelings about the interior, I still thought it was a really gorgeous piece, but it did make me wonder that if the interior had also been designed by Lichtenstein, one of the most famous and influential pop artists of all time, would I have been allowed inside to put my grubby fingers all over these panels? Instead, because it was created by lesser artists, this piece wasn't seen as untouchable in 2024. Other aspects of the original Luna Luna were on display in more of an archival manner. Sadly, Palace of the Winds, the pavilion where professional flatulists farted alongside music, is not recreated as part of this exhibition, with only a video playing archival footage nestled into the exterior piece that was created for the pavilion by Manfred Dykes. I'm disappointed Drake didn't splash the cash to hire a couple people to fart into a mic all day, though I guess I could get a similar experience by listening to his 2023 album For All the Dogs. Before visiting, I was led to believe by Luna Luna's website that British artist Jim Whiting's contribution was on display as part of this revival. Whilst he's less famous than many of the artists I've mentioned so far, from the perspective of being a theme park connoisseur, I felt his contribution to Luna Luna was the one that, on paper, intrigued me the most. Whiting had previously gained acclaim for his robotic installations, with the most famous being his work on the music video for Herbie Hancock's 1983 song Rocket, which won 5 MTV Video Music Awards and featured animatronics jerkily moving and dancing to the song. For Luna Luna, Jim Whiting was approached to design a mechanical theatre, using animatronics to make a weird, unnerving show that visitors could watch. Whilst most of Luna Luna is firmly riffing off classic amusement park and funfair rides, this one instead feels like it's artifying more of a theme park, and specifically Disney park staple. As someone who's a big fan of these classic kitschy animatronic shows like the Carousel of Progress and Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, this really excited me to see. I think there's this uncanny valley vibe to a lot of animatronics in theme parks in a way I find deeply appealing, and something leaning into that underlying unsettling feeling would be my dream art amusement park attraction. Tragically, all that was on display of Whiting's work here were a few sad, flaccid leftovers of these robots, attached with fun labels such as couple in bed and porno watching man. However, I was extremely pleased to discover a film showcasing the original Luna Luna with a sign outside the front saying, "Content guidance. This film contains animatronics performing sex scenes which are part of Jim Whiting's mechanical theatre." Based on that clip and Whiting's other work, you can somewhat get a sense of how it plays with the uncanny nature of this technology to create something that feels deeply uneasy. To me, it's a real shame this isn't part of the revival, as it feels in some respects the most groundbreaking part of the original, but I also get it would probably be the most technologically complicated of all these pieces to restore. So all the attractions I mentioned so far, everyone who paid the standard ticket price of around $36 to $47 depending on whether it's peak or off-peak got to see, but in order to get the full experience you needed to buy the Moon Pass, a ticket which cost almost double but gave you access to 3 extra attractions that you could experience essentially exactly the same way as back in 1987. To access each of these, you had to traverse this dotted line on the floor saying Moon Pass only and show this pass to a member of staff to get in. The first of these was David Hockney's Enchanted Tree Pavilion, a circular chamber you could walk through with a mural of abstract trees, which, to be real, I didn't really get or feel impressed by. It wasn't very visually stimulating, it was poorly lit, and it wasn't massively well restored compared to the other pieces, with peeling paint on the ceiling. Perhaps it was this element of knowing I paid a $41 upcharge to give me access that made me a bit more critical here, but I was very underwhelmed by the experience. More impressive was being able to enter Salvador Dali's contribution to Luna Luna with the Moon Pass, which was very cutely titled Dali Dome. This wasn't Dali's first work along these lines. For the 1939 World's Fair, he created a surrealist funhouse called Dream of Venus, which featured semi-nude mermaids in black bodysuits swimming around. The entrance to Dali Dome pays tribute to this, with mermaids painted onto the mirrored exterior. Inside the pavilion is a large geodesic mirrored dome, which creates this kaleidoscope effect, similar to one I'd seen at one of my favourite UK attractions, Wake the Tiger. With the Moon Pass, I was able to walk inside the dome, where I was mesmerised by being able to look around and stare at myself, duplicated over and over again. What more could I want in life? I also liked the way the vibrant bright pink colour of the floor was reflected all around the room, especially with how nicely it coordinated with my Hotline Bling shirt. It was also cool to get to experience something so large and impressive all to myself, and really take the time to lose myself in the moment. So much so that I had to get kicked out as a significant line had formed outside waiting for me to finish. What can I say, I was just truly lost in the art. And definitely not just taking lots of selfies. The final bonus experience as part of the Moon Pass was Andre Heller's Wedding Chapel. The idea behind this originally in 1987 was in some respects a political statement, a wedding chapel where you could marry anyone or anything and therefore an open invitation for same-sex couples to marry at a time where it wasn't legal. Obviously now, thanks to Macklemore, gay marriage is legal, and so I thought it would be funny to do the most heteronormative thing possible and simply marry a woman. I was meant to be going with my good friend Kat, who I drunkenly proposed to on a night out 10 years ago, and I planned for us to finally follow up on the long-running joke of our engagement and get married at Luna Luna. Sadly, Kat got food poisoning from the Pirates of the Caribbean restaurant at Disneyland, and so I ended up visiting Luna Luna by myself. But there, I suddenly realised there was someone even more important to me than Kat that I could marry in this chapel.
This might be the most important day of your life. Are you willing and ready to be married under the laws of Luna Luna?
Of course.
Mike, do you vow to take Drake and love him and care for him when times are good, bad, and just okay?
Of course.
Amazing. And Drake, do you vow to do your damn thing with Mike for as long as you both shall choose?
I didn't hear a no.
Alright, and it's as easy as that. By the power vested in me and the many moons of Luna Luna, I pronounce you both wed. Amazing. And now you may take your lovely spouse and take a photo for your certificate.
Oh, thank you.
Amazing.
Yeah, I married Drake. And I know haters will say that we're not meant to be, that I'm not his type, that I'm too old for him, but you don't know us and our love. After the wedding, they took a Polaroid of myself and Drake on our beautiful wedding day for our marriage certificate. Sadly, the camera was not working, and so the picture came out like this. I hope this isn't a metaphor for our marriage. Thankfully, in the eyes of Luna Luna, tearing up the certificate counts as a divorce, so I've got that as a backup in case Kendrick reignites the feud and embarrasses my husband even further. Naturally, like any good amusement park experience, it inevitably ended up in the gift shop, and here there are a lot of really interesting items, including a toy Basquiat Ferris wheel, a Liechtenstein bull maze, and a Basquiat baboon arse plush. I bought this Keith Haring top, which featured a moon logo that he drew for Luna Luna, before finally leaving the warehouse after spending far too many hours inside. I mentioned earlier that I was not just excited, but a bit emotional when I entered Luna Luna, after finally arriving somewhere I'd been thinking about visiting for so long. And on leaving, I had definitely enjoyed the experience. It's presented nicely, the staff were all great and really knowledgeable, and even had carnival performers roaming around adding to the atmosphere. But I wasn't dissatisfied per se, but I did have a lot of complicated feelings. After I left, I sat outside for a bit talking to a couple who'd flown in from Arizona and a group of art students who were visiting from New York, and I wasn't the only one who felt conflicted about the whole experience. Why? The night's still young. We have time to unpack this. Come on. After visiting Luna Luna, one part I kept thinking about, and no, it wasn't my beautiful wedding to Drake. In the exhibition, there was a display with a timeline detailing every event from cultural and political influences to personal landmarks for the artists who contributed leading up to the creation of Luna Luna. There was also a shorter description of the changes that took place after Luna Luna, such as the stock market crash of 1987, the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, and this significant event in the art world. In the fall of 1987, a painting by Vincent van Gogh sold for $53.9 million, the highest price ever paid for a painting at auction. Even though Van Gogh sold few works during his lifetime, that sale permanently linked art with money in the public imagination. I think it's very interesting they chose to highlight this, because Luna Luna went from something made on a fairly shoestring budget to something that now has a 9-figure investment behind it. And that creates some weird complications. After I left Luna Luna, I hopped in a taxi and went 10 minutes down the street to the Broad Art Gallery. The main reason I went was to see their Basquiat exhibit. With his detailed art style, it's really one that rewards being seen in person, and I love being able to admire all the little touches up close. One piece that really drew my attention was called Obnoxious Liberals, particularly the text scrawled at the bottom that proudly declared, "Not for sale." Basquiat made this piece in 1982. 6 years later, and a year after Luna Luna opened, Basquiat died of a heroin overdose. He was 27 years old. Keith Haring wrote a tribute to Basquiat, calling him the supreme poet. Every action is symbolic, every gesture an event. Greedily we wonder what masterpieces we might have been cheated out of by his death. Only now will people begin to understand the magnitude of his contribution. Less than 2 years later, Haring too passed away due to complications from AIDS. He was 31 years old. Both Haring and Basquiat were quite famous when they were alive. Now they are two of the most popular and beloved artists of all time, and as such their work has become extremely valuable. In 2017, an untitled piece by Basquiat was auctioned for a record $110 million US. Art dealer Jeffrey Deitch said after the sale that Basquiat is now in the same league as Francis Bacon and Pablo Picasso. But here, league means financial league, linking the value of his art to its financial worth. But interestingly, with both Basquiat and Haring, as their legacy has grown with time, whilst much of their work has disappeared into private collections, just walking down the street you can see their imagery on various apparel. I feel like basically every time I leave the house, I see at least one person wearing something with Keith Haring's work on it. This mass merchandisation of Haring and Basquiat has received criticism for commodifying and sanitizing their work. I do understand this criticism, and definitely think some of these products are a bit much. It'd be hard to defend Basquiat Uno, but I don't think there's anything wrong with being able to go into a high street store and buy a Basquiat or Haring t-shirt. For a start, I'd be a hypocrite. But also, I think this widespread merchandising of their work, particularly for Haring, was a big part of their goals, with art dealer Simon Oldfield describing Haring as instrumental in terms of challenging the traditional art commerce dynamic. Both Haring and Basquiat started as street artists, with their work being, by default, in public spaces accessible to all. As their fame grew, suddenly their work began to become popular in the art world, which, by default, is a fairly elitist circle, and the prices of their work skyrocketed. To counteract this, in 1986, the year before Luna Luna opened, Haring decided to open the Pop Shop, an entire store in New York painted in his unique style, selling reasonably priced t-shirts and other apparel with his work, as well as of his peers Basquiat and Schaff, printed on it. The goal of this was to make their art as accessible as possible, with Haring saying, "The use of commercial projects has enabled me to reach millions of people whom I would not have reached by remaining an unknown artist. I assumed after all that the point of making art was to communicate and contribute to culture." The idea behind this was not just to sell merch, but to sell art. Or at the very least, the merch was the art and the art was the merch, which at the time was a pretty revolutionary idea. Even if these t-shirts and hats and keyrings typically didn't make the same political statements or tackle controversial topics in the same way some of their most compelling work did, the importance of these as an entryway to the art remains significant. Sure, some might find these artists through a museum, but some will find them through a t-shirt. Some will find them through a reference on a rap song. Or for me, I'll be totally honest, it was through an amusement park. Before I became obsessed with Luna Luna, I barely knew anything about these artists. I recognised their names, sure, but to my shame knew very little else beyond that. Luna Luna, like the Pop Shop, was an active rejection of a certain kind of exclusive members-only club for art to reach new people like me. At first, I thought this was just going to be a weird, funny story about how Drake spent millions on a niche amusement park, but through researching this project, I finally found an avenue into the art world that I'd never properly been able to find before. I feel like a bunch of these artists I've now forged my own personal connection to their work, particularly that of Keith Haring, who I honestly see a lot of myself in. This contemporary, widespread merchandising of their work seems much closer to the values that drove them to get involved in projects like Luna Luna and the Pop Shop than having someone pay 9 figures at an auction to own their work and then hide it away in some private collection. While someone like Jay-Z is clearly a genuine fan of Basquiat who relates deeply to his work, there is still to me something that does slightly jar about the way he raps about owning his work.
Yellow Basquiat in my kitchen corner. Go ahead, lean on that shit, Blue, you own it, huh?
Here Jay-Z is rapping about this painting as a piece of capital to be owned rather than a piece of art to be seen, bragging about his toddler daughter Blue Ivy dribbling on something so expensive and exclusive. Whilst Jay-Z did eventually lend the piece he's probably talking about here in 2019 to an exhibition at the Guggenheim Museum in New York, there's still a weird energy about 2013 Jay-Z boasting about the Basquiat in his kitchen that you're not able to see. The lack of public access to the work is almost a flex here. A similar energy came with Jay-Z and Beyonce's 2021 campaign for the luxury jewelry brand Tiffany, which involved the couple posing in front of a never-before-seen Basquiat painting. Tiffany claimed that this piece's distinct blue colour was obviously referencing the brand's Tiffany blue, with an executive of the brand saying that the colour is so specific that it has to be some kind of homage. However, Larry Gagosian, an art dealer who Basquiat lived and worked with in the early 80s, said of the colour that Basquiat probably just liked it. Trying to turn a dead man into a retroactive brand advocate is pretty gross. But I understand why Tiffany's marketing team wanted to use this Basquiat piece as part of their campaign. Art like this is extremely valuable, and it makes sense to want luxury goods like jewelry to be associated with it. And Tiffany is not the only jewelry brand to have attempted to align with the art world. Now, you might have wondered if, during the decades it was locked away in storage, Andre Heller ever attempted to create a similar project to his magnum opus, Luna Luna. Well, about 8 years later, Heller did design and oversee another art amusement park. Kind of. Because there was one major catch to this version. In 1995, nestled in the Austrian mountains, Swarovski Crystalwelten opened, an attraction designed by Andre Heller to celebrate 100 years of Swarovski crystals. Whilst not quite an amusement park in the way Luna Luna was, this drew on a lot of the same ideas, with various art-focused installations and attractions. It included a collection of crystal-based artworks by the likes of Salvador Dali and Keith Haring, a James Turrell light installation that I'm sure Drake would love, and for a period of time had a direct successor to a Luna Luna attraction, with Jim Whiting designing a new version of his robot mechanical theatre, although sadly in this version the robots don't fuck. There was even a carousel decorated with over 15 million Swarovski crystals, described by its designer Jaime Hayon as an art piece in movement, and unlike the Luna Luna carousels, you can actually still ride this attraction. It's cool to see Hella attempt something in the vein of Luna Luna again, and the crystal motif is such a gorgeous, interesting landscape for artists to play with. But I can't help but shake the feeling that regardless of how this art looks, the corporate context of this makes it fundamentally less interesting, and at worst actively confusing. This weird tension is seen in this piece by Sylvie Fleury, a large sign saying yes to all, embedded with thousands of Swarovski crystals. According to the Crystal Velton website, its message is a cynical commentary on the consumerism of today's society, and is in dramatic and edgy contrast to its glamorous crystal design. The irony of this piece on paper could be really effective, but I don't know, it just feels like its anti-consumerism message doesn't quite land in a place with multiple Swarovski crystal gift shops. I feel even more uncomfortable with an exhibit here created by Hella called Heroes of Peace. Here, holograms of actors representing historic figures such as Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr. and Albert Einstein appear in a multimedia presentation aiming to make visitors think about how each of us can make our own contribution to peace. Hella creating such an exhibit makes a lot of sense when you look at his track record as a peace advocate, and this feels like an interesting successor to some of the anti-fascist messaging found in Luna Luna. However, when placed in a Swarovski exhibit, considering the Swarovski family infamously were members of the Nazi Party, and the modern company are actively burying research done into the company's historic links to the Nazi regime, hiring an Austrian Jewish artist like Hella to make an exhibit like this feels like a calculated, insincere PR decision. Whilst Crystal Velton is not extortionately priced, costing around €23 to visit, which means this art is not accessible, the overall goal of the experience is to use this art to create a sense of affinity for a brand. I'm not going to pretend I'm above brand marketing, I literally work in brand marketing, but whilst this experience does share a lot of DNA with Luna Luna, the reality is this fundamentally has more in common with a brand visitor attraction like the Guinness Storehouse or Cadbury World or my beloved Tato Park. Rest in peace. I'm not even really criticising Hella for working on this. He had the opportunity to make a cool art exhibition using money from a big brand, which, unlike Luna Luna, didn't plunge him into debt, and has now consistently been seen by tens of thousands of people year after year. Luna Luna, despite its noble intentions, fundamentally reached a lot less people. But if anything, this shows how unique and special Luna Luna was as an idea, and how significant it was. Even something like Swarovski Crystal Velton, designed by Hella himself, still doesn't quite land the same, as I feel like this quite pure goal to make art accessible to the masses is such a key part of the essence of Luna Luna. Or at least, it was for the original version of Luna Luna in 1987, because this doesn't quite land for me with the Luna Luna revival. When Luna Luna opened in 1987, it cost 20 Deutsche Marks to enter, which is about the equivalent of $11 today. When I visited in LA, it cost about $36 to visit during an off-peak time in the middle of the week, which went up to $47 on weekends. But as I mentioned before, in order to enter the Dali and Hockney attractions, you needed the VIP Moon Pass, for which I paid $77 during off-peak, which rose to an eye-watering $85 per person on weekends. For context, that's the same price as the most expensive day ticket to Knott's Berry Farm, a nearby theme park with a full day's worth of attractions. Something like Luna Luna was designed to be affordable and accessible, and this was such a core part of its raison d'etre. But by having a tiered system which paywalls some of its exhibits, is this revival accessible to all, or is it for an elite few who truly want to get close to Dali and Hockney and are willing to part with an extra $40 for the privilege? I understand there's a practical consideration here due to the limited number of people the experiences on the Moon Pass can accommodate. Even visiting daytime during the week, getting absorbed staring at my own reflection in the Dali Dome caused a line to pile up outside, and limiting numbers for these experiences reduces these capacity issues. But also, isn't queuing part of the experience of the amusement park, the waiting, that anticipation building before you get to experience something for yourself? Although that might be my inner Brit coming out, being raised in the same country where people queued for 24 hours just to take a quick look at the Queen's coffin. But the fact that the only attractions which, rather than being observed from a distance, could be experienced exactly as they were back in 1987 are only accessible by paying double the price rubs me up the wrong way, especially considering Hela's ambitions for Luna Luna to be something that was meant to reach people who wouldn't otherwise experience art. I also think not being able to touch and ride the mechanical rides at Luna Luna as they were originally intended is a real shame, losing that participatory, intimate nature of the art. I understand why this is, safety is the number one concern, but the reality is it takes a fairly novel idea and turns it into just another art exhibition. Except, what's being protected here? Us? Or the art? Maybe because I spend too much time at Blackpool Pleasure Beach, a historic English seaside amusement park where a bunch of the rides are over 100 years old and feel like they could fall over at any moment, but I'm not quite sure I fully buy the safety reasoning here. Daniel McLean, the lawyer who was instrumental in bringing Luna Luna back, when asked why the rides are no longer rideable, said, "In terms of health and safety, no way. Also, in terms of their fragility and value as artworks, it's not possible, sadly." He naturally leads with safety, also mentioning that the Ferris wheel originally dated from the 1930s, but also brings up their value as artworks. The impression I get is that even if the safety aspect could be overcome, the potential risk to artwork worth millions of dollars from those riding would still be too great. This lines up with what CBS News reported when covering Luna Luna, saying,
"Time has made each one of these artists legendary, which also means each piece is too valuable to ride."
No matter how hard these artists work to make their art as accessible and widely available in their lifetimes, the reality is that in the years since, their reputations have made these pieces worth millions of dollars. Sure, the decision to not let people ride might not line up with the ideals that drove them to be created in the first place, but why would you let that jeopardize your financial investment? It was incredibly unique to create art that you could ride that moves you physically, maybe emotionally as well. But watching these move around in a half-empty warehouse is just a tribute to an ambitious art amusement park than once was, rather than truly continuing its trailblazing spirit. But that doesn't mean that such a concept is off the table here. When Luna Luna was originally announced to be returning in late 2022, it was part of a more ambitious vision, which alongside these archival attractions was going to feature a fresh slate of artists to contribute new interactive and rideable pieces. In late 2023, it was revealed this idea had been postponed, but was teased to still be part of a later phase which would include a full-on contemporary art amusement park. The team in interviews claimed they'd already been in touch with European ride manufacturers, as well as several contemporary artists interested in creating these new rideable pieces. One of these artists they spoke to was German artist Karsten Holler, who I mentioned earlier was an artist who was inspired to ditch science and pursue art in the first place, partly because of the impact of his visit to Luna Luna back in 1987. You can see the clear influence of Luna Luna on his work. He designed the world's tallest slide at the Olympic Park in London, which I'm still too scared to go and try for myself, but his work with the most obvious lineage to Luna Luna is his work with carousels and chair swings. What's interesting about these is rather than just doing what Luna Luna did, which was to take amusement park rides and use the physical form as a canvas to paint or sculpt into a piece of art, Holler takes it a step further by using the actual experience of the ride's movement as part of the art piece. Each of his carousels are modified in some way to subvert the idea of what we expect from a ride like this, such as moving backwards or moving incredibly slowly. His carousels play with riders' expectations of thrill and excitement, and instead use this movement to encourage contemplation and reflection. Maybe this is also what the designers of Epcot's Living with the Land were trying to achieve when they created a ride that mind-numbingly dull. Who knows?
This technique precisely controls and recycles water and nutrients.
What I love about this, by going one stage further and making how you experience the physical sensations of the ride part of the art statement, it really shows the untapped potential that could still be explored via future iterations of Luna Luna and other attempts at the idea of an art amusement park. In March 2024, a short-term pop-up curated by Karsten Holler appeared next door to Luna Luna called the Double Club Los Angeles, in collaboration with, again, another luxury brand Prada, in what felt like a dry run for what this next iteration of Luna Luna could look like. The idea behind this was to create an artistic fusion between an amusement park and a music venue. Holler worked on the visuals and overall design of the physical space, bringing in vintage amusement park attractions that people could actually ride, whilst Drake curated a music lineup across 2 nights, including acts such as Travis Scott, Anderson .Paak and Lil Wayne, directly bringing in Drake's influence within the music world into this art amusement park. This pop-up was only open for 4 days, being an exclusive VIP event for the first 2 days, attended by the likes of Hunter Schafer, Letitia Wright and Ice Spice, followed by letting those visiting Lulu Luna in for free for the next 2 days, though naturally without the performances from this A-list musical lineup. Annoyingly, this was only a few days before I arrived in LA, and as it was only announced a week before, I wasn't able to reschedule my trip to arrive a bit earlier to see this. For such a unique idea, it's disappointing that it was a really limited experience, and this full combination of music, art and amusements, kind of the perfect fulfillment of the concept of a Drake theme park, was only experienced by a fairly exclusive guest list. Although this was clearly a group who truly love art, as when Lil Wayne took to the stage he shouted, "If you can appreciate real art, make some motherfucking noise," and the crowd went wild. Holler started working with Prada in 1999, and his relationship with the brand has funded projects that have allowed him to create at an ambitious scale he wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. Rather than being used to promote Prada products directly like something like Swarovski Crystal Velton did, the brand's aim was more to use experiential art to create this sense of exclusivity. The goal was to make Prada as a brand feel like the club you want to get inside or get access to, and buying their products might put you on the same level as the Ice Spices of this world. Maybe this is me being bitter I didn't get to see this for myself, but this forced exclusivity to me is deeply uninteresting and feels counter to everything the original crop of Lulu Luna artists wanted to create with their art and their work. And this is nothing against Karl Holler as an artist. In fact, what fascinates me about him is he seems to really get it. When talking about the importance of his original visit to Lulu Luna, he said,
"Even though I thought that some of the rides were not so, let's say, entertaining in a bodily sense as they are in a real amusement park, they were also much better in the sense that you could be part of the artwork. You could go there and sit, for instance, in Jean-Michel Basquiat's Ferris wheel, which I did, and sit in his work and be turned around. So I'm sure this influenced me a lot."
He understands crucially the importance of getting to be part of the artwork, that just looking at these rides as art objects is missing a key part of the jigsaw. This is what made Lulu Luna so exciting to me conceptually, and I do hope at some point they actually do a next iteration of this art amusement park, where those visiting can fully participate. Perhaps Holler could be the next Hella if the opportunity arose. It's only one letter different. Whether this promised modern version of Lulu Luna will ever happen, I don't know. God knows the amount of theme park projects I've followed with promised second phases that never materialised. When thinking about the much talked about figure of $100 million invested into reviving Lulu Luna, based on the relatively modest scale of what they've done so far, I'm hopeful that some of this money has been earmarked for this full-scale art amusement park in the future. The good news so far is that Lulu Luna clearly was successful enough that, after its run in LA, it has since travelled to New York in late 2024. Notably, they've even commissioned one sole new edition, created by the art collective Poncili Crayon, that you can actually physically touch and engage with. Except it's a soft play area. I'm sure this is very exciting if you're 5 years old. Lulu Luna was also meant to open in Atlanta in late 2025, although this has since been delayed with no clear reason why, and I'm really hoping the financial feasibility wasn't what stopped it from opening here. However, the park's pricing strategy with this tiered approach, which feels quite profit driven, doesn't make me hopeful that this full-scale art amusement park is coming anytime soon. It feels like this Phase 2 is somewhat dependent on the success of how Phase 1 has been received, and more importantly, how much money it's made. As I said earlier, I think Drake reviving Lulu Luna was primarily to add something to his image rather than to his bank balance. And if this is the case, I think the attempt to also make as much money from it as possible does slightly cheapen the idea of owning this as a status symbol. Back in the Renaissance, rich people funded art for its own sake, or at the very least the fame and prestige that funding art for its own sake brought with it. And I think Drake and Dream Crew need to treat this project in a similar way. Ignore the profit sheets and look at this as a cultural gift, a legacy project. I obviously have a vested interest in wanting this to happen because this isn't just an art project, but an amusement park project. Theme park journalist Todd Martins in the LA Times summed up Luna Luna's importance to the theme park space incredibly well, saying, "Luna Luna will make the argument that amusement and theme parks matter. There's a reason, after all, Disneyland draws an estimated 17 million people per year, and it's not solely because we love singing pirates. Amusement parks are a reflection of our culture's myths and dreams, providing a place not to escape but to play, a place of jubilation in good times and a communal balm in dark ones." This is something that I care about deeply, the importance of the cultural and artistic value of these parks and attractions. Disneyland, Coney Island, Knott's Berry Farm are hugely important American cultural institutions, but also places like Efteling and Tivoli Gardens deserve the same reverence within Europe. Luna Luna is one of the boldest things to ever happen in the amusement park space, a pure expression of joy and artistry, bridging European and American art and culture to create something truly one of a kind. But as much as its history and legacy is significant, I think what's more important with Luna Luna as a project is how it could contribute to the medium's future. I love how Luna Luna takes the form of a ride and turns it into art, but I'm already someone who views this as an art form. The way I talk about Mary Blair's design approach to It's a Small World, or Tom Van Der Ven's to Drone Vlogged, is the same way I talk about Herring's to his carousel, or Basquiat's to his Ferris wheel. But whilst I do consider this to be an art form, it is rare that those working within it get anywhere close to this level of creative freedom. I'm not saying every amusement park needs to hire the next Salvador Dali to design their drop tower, although come to think of it, a surrealist drop tower would slap, but I think there's real potential here to push forward the artistry of the amusement park attraction as a medium. There's a few artists who, like Holler, are doing interesting work currently like this in isolation, but the next iteration of Luna Luna, if it does come to fruition, could be a crucial part of that journey forward. The future of theme parks might be hinging entirely on Drake. So let's talk directly to him. My dear husband, Drizzy, Champagne Pappy, Wheelchair Jimmy, Aubrey. You have an opportunity right now. I know you've had a bad couple of years PR-wise, so it's time to do something big to help your image, right? Luna Luna was important in 1987 because of how forward-thinking, unique and accessible it was as a vehicle for sharing art, and you investing the money to put it on display again is so cool, Drake. It's great that we're able to see this lost art again, but what we need is for the next generation of artists to take this idea forward. Don't worry about the money, don't worry about making a profit, just get Karsten Holler on the phone, ask him to curate this project, give him the freedom to do what he likes, and then make sure your name is slapped over all the press articles about it. Because this is your chance to leave an impact on the world beyond just your music, not just in the world of amusement parks or the world of art, but also to challenge what's happening culturally. Luna Luna was about, amongst other things, being anti-bigotry and anti-fascism, and I'm getting really scared about the direction we're heading in. We're getting more culturally divided and less empathetic, bigotry is more acceptable than it's been for a long time, and it's frightening the amount of power being gained by politicians who are barely hiding their fascist desires anymore, openly talking with glee about censoring art that dares to critique them. It's a scary world to be in at the moment. And frankly, art alone isn't going to save us. But just because it isn't going to save us, doesn't mean it's not going to help. Art that speaks truth to power, that challenges bigotry, that critiques fascism is more important than ever, and giving a new generation of artists a platform to reach an audience they might not otherwise be able to engage with could be one, yes small, but still important way of helping to move the dial in our current culture of fear and hatred. Come on, Drake. This is so stupid. Why am I talking to this picture of Drake like he can hear me? There's got to be a way to actually get Drake's attention. Which is why I wanted to talk to you tonight. I have a plan. I'm going to release a diss track. So, honest feedback, how good is this rap? It's pretty good. Say Drake.